In the last episode, you saw me build up my new engine before installing it back into its cradle. Once that was done, I also managed to connect the engine back to the torque tube. But we are now fully in the area that I do not really remember doing any of this. So I've just spent about the last half an hour, 45 minutes, working my way around the engine, making sure everything's plugged in or I know exactly where every connection is going to go to. Obviously, whilst the body is off, the engine is incredibly accessible. I'm going to do the spark plug shortly. We're going to put new O-rings on the fuel injectors, etc., etc. And then we're going to start fitting up like the inlet manifold and getting all that sort of ready as well before we put the body on, because it's a lot easier to do it like this. But before I put the body on, I want to make sure that I know exactly where everything's going and I'm not missing anything, because again, once the body's on, it's going to be a lot harder. So let me give you a little run around now. Okay, so first up, thermostat. As you can see, these are quite obvious where they go. I've actually connected this tube up here, which you'll also see I have now screwed down. And this actually remains as the only thing I can't figure out where it's going. So I need to look at my footage on where that goes, but everything else seems to be okay. Beyond that, I've moved all the fuel rails and coil packs out of the way. There was, if you remember in the last episode, there was a plug here that I couldn't figure out. Turned out, if I can show you, it was this sensor down here that I needed to just fit. So I fit that sensor. I think it's the crankshaft position sensor, but I could be wrong there. Then it leaves this tube here, which I believe connects to this tube here. We then have these two sort of hoses here. They connect onto the inside of these bits of the manifold. There's also these two electrical connections, one there, one there. They also button into, as you can see, the bottom of the inlet manifold. Then once that's done, we've got this sort of air hose here, and you can see it's got this sort of little tube down the bottom. So firstly, the big bit will go onto the end of the manifold, but then these bits will just slide on something like that. And then we do have various connections. These two, for instance, will go to these two, but I'm not so bothered about the front bit at this point. I'm just trying to get everything sort of about from halfway engine back, just trying to get that all sorted, because this is going to be a lot harder to do. I'm still waiting on the torque tube bolts, but I'll just fit those when they arrive. I won't bother showing it, but yeah, I'm just waiting on them to arrive. So we won't drop the body until that's done. But yeah, obviously fuel rails and coil packs will go in very soon, and also our manifolds, which will, yeah, squeeze down there. I'm guessing these will sort of sit out the way like this, so our inlet manifolds can squeeze over. But yeah, whilst I'm talking to you, I'm sort of trying to make it make sense in my head as well, because if I understand exactly where everything's going, then surely we're gonna have no issues when we put the body back on the car. So yeah, it'll probably be easier to just show you with a sort of time lapse, I guess. So let's do that, and we'll start with fitting up the final bits of that engine. So first up is to replace the spark plugs. You'll remember from the last episode that I actually managed to source 11 new ones. So I'm starting off here by removing all the old ones and picking which one looked in the best condition and reinstalling it back into the engine along with the 11 new ones. Once I've tightened all the smart plugs, I can now fit the coil packs, and these just slot in and are then held in place with a screw each. Following on from that, I can fit the covers before starting to plumb up all the various hoses.
Now I'm happy with that, it's time to fit the inlet manifolds and the new gaskets sourced directly from Aston Martin.
Okay, sit wrap this side is basically done now. Still yet to find out what that plug is meant to go to, but I'm sure that'll announce itself probably a bit more when we've got the body on. But anyway, I need to get a new one of these clips. I just can't figure them out, and I'm going to put probably, I just need to get larger ones. I've got Jubilee clips like these, but I need to get a larger one like that. That sort of fits into there. But yeah, everything else seems to go on okay. We're sort of all lined up. I've just realized this rail needs to come out. It's meant to sit on top. So I'm just going to take that off and then put the manifold on, then reattach it, I think. Yes, just thinking about it, that rail definitely needs to come off, and then the manifold, once the manifold's in, the inlet manifold, there should just be enough space to put the rail around onto those screws. So we're getting there bit by bit. Oh, and by the way, the rail that sort of comes along here, and we couldn't find out what this tube is for. Pretty sure this goes on to like the sort of coolant overflow tank, because I'm pretty sure this is where it'll get the coolant from, and then it'll sort of send it around the engine in the thermostat, and then if it needs to, it'll go around the radiator when it needs to start cooling itself. So, bit of intel there has helped me figure it out, because otherwise I would have been stumped. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that goes to the coolant overflow tank, or coolant tank. I don't know if it's the overflow one, probably. Coolant overflow tank, we'll go with that.
Time to fit the second inlet manifold, and you can see a bit more clearly here that the manifolds are held in with 6 screws each. Once it's secured down, I can then attach the hoses and electrical connections that I previously talked about.
Oh my god, this engine looks like a beast again. As soon as those inlet manifolds went on, I mean, it just looks like an absolute V12 monster. And don't worry about the marks or the dirt on the inlet manifold. It will all go off for a full detail once I've finished the car. But obviously more important is whether the engine works, not how it looks. Okay, one thing I have thought about with putting the manifolds on, it's not a problem, it's just going to make life a bit more awkward, is we do still have one more hose up here that we need to connect to the bit on the top. But I have left the side of this off, so once it's down we should be able to run it through there. And if I can show you, just connect it up like that.
The engine was really coming along now, but the next task was to try and remind myself how the fuel rails and injectors were connected up. But I did find the tubes leading from the PCV valve were getting in the way, and I couldn't get the injectors to sit in their correct positions, so I had to swap them around.
Yeah, that actually turned out to not be too bad. I just loosened this clip off, popped the tube off by the PCV valve, you can see it's there, and then I lifted that off and fed it through and under. Now that all lines up okay. Now the thing is, I'm actually gonna have to lift these up again. I'm just trying to show you, because I need to replace the O-rings on the fuel injectors. And on the fuel injectors, we have a blue O-ring and a green O-ring. Now for the life of me, I've not been able to find any green O-rings online, even on Scooter or Euro Spares, but I have been able to find blue ones. But weirdly, they only come in packs of 8, which I didn't realize. I sort of thought nothing of it at first. I just ordered the pack. So there's obviously 12 injectors because there's 12 cylinders. So yeah, we're going to replace the O-rings on 8 of them, 8 out of 12. I don't know why they wouldn't just provide 12, that's so weird. Right, bit of a mundane task I've just done off camera, which is just replacing the blue O-rings on the rearmost 8 injectors. So these 4 have not been touched. They got the original O-rings on. So I've done it that way because if these start to leak or whatever, then they're going to be a lot easier to service than these ones, which have the new ones and shouldn't fail. But anyway, since then I've lined it all back up, and it's just a case of getting these bolts back in there, and those bolts are in there. In 3, 2, 1. Job done. Right, okay, bit to update you on here. So the fuel rails are all in, all screws are in as well. That just holds it in place. Yeah, they went in absolutely fine. Then the actual harnesses are pretty self-explanatory. I had them leaning back over here, but as soon as you put them over here, because of the shortness of the wires, there's only one way these can go on. So it was actually quite self-explanatory. Then they all plugged in, and interestingly, that bit that I wasn't sure about, this connection here, has now connected up. So that is also all good. And just lastly, to remember, just in case some of you are at home doing this, these are the vac lines. They come on the back here as well, and there's another one around there too. And so as far as I'm aware, that is engine done, ready to go. Now, if you recall, we're now at the back of the car. These brake lines, when I was trying to disconnect them, they just rotted out and they just came off pretty much. As I was trying to turn them, they actually broke at the main bit up here. So I've got a new brake line that I need to fit there. I've got a new handbrake cable as well that I need to get all set up down here. Again, it's just going to be easier whilst the body's off to do all that. And then I believe we got another line to run around here as well, I think. So other than those brake lines and the handbrake cable, I think we're basically good to drop the engine after we've done the air boxes, and I've got new filters for those as well. And they are in here. Now, it's another thing. I've not gone through Aston Martin, but they are Aston Martin filters. As you can see, nice and brand new, ready to go. So I just need to fit those into here, and then we'll get this bolted, well, not bolted, sorry, but we'll get the actual hoses connected back up.
The old air filters looked in a pretty bad way, and let me tell you, the inside of this airbox stunk of the ocean.
But anyway, with new filters in, it's not going to smell like the ocean anymore. Just going to give them a little clean sort of dust down as well. And yeah, then it'll be next job. Okay, air boxes are connected to the bit that will feed into the engine. That's what we need for now. In terms of connections, there's just one. And I believe I spotted that one. Trying to avoid the light for you. That one there. So obviously once that comes down, we can plug that in. And then that will be that bit done. Same again with that. There'll be a connection up there. I think it's this one. But that's all once the engine's down. Now I am still waiting for the torque tube bolts. So in the meantime, I'm just going to start doing those brake lines as well. And then hopefully by the time the brake lines are done, torque tube bolts have arrived. We'll see.
Moving on to the brake lines, which are again new parts straight from Aston Martin. Thankfully, these were really straightforward to swap with the body off. Of course, I'll need to remember to fill the brake fluid reservoir and then bleed the brakes before trying to move the car down the line. I must remember that. As simple as that, 2 new brake lines.
Okay, so as you've seen, brake lines are in. I've also done the handbrake cable off camera. It's a bit of a boring task, to be honest. But yeah, that's all in there. At least stay disconnected for now. I have cut the old one. So this is the old one here. Just use my angle grinder because at the minute the battery is disconnected. And the only way to get to the handbrake cable to disconnect at this end is to move the seat or take it out, or ideally I think you can move it backwards or forwards, but I can't obviously do that with the battery disconnected and the body being up there, so I've just cut it. So obviously once I can get to it, I will disconnect it and just pull it out, and then I think I'll just then have to pull that through and then connect it in on inside, but that is a job that I have to do once the body is on. And in truth, we're basically there in terms of getting this body down now, because I have done the torque tube bolts and I've also done the exhaust manifold bolts. Well, on each side there's 3 bolts. I can only reach 2 on either side because of the pallets underneath. So once I've got the body all connected, I'll lift it back up and just get those final 2 bolts. But they're all done, but there is actually one thing I found out that's stopping me from dropping this body. And if you recall, this, I was struggling to figure out where it went. Now I've been watching my footage back, and it connects to this piece, and as you might see, what I could see out that tube was this, or just this end. So obviously I've not disconnected it. You're supposed to disconnect it, so probably when I've lifted the body off, it's just pulled this out. So I can't do this, or I don't want to yet, because this is going to be much easier to fit. Actually just going to cut myself off that this probably can be fit and the body's still put down. It's going to make things a little bit more awkward, but not too bad, to be honest. I'll still be able to fit it. So yeah, we probably will tomorrow morning start with dropping this body. But yeah, I'm a bit too exhausted. It's been a long day today, 11 hours or so. So it's probably not a good time to put the body down. I'll only end up breaking something. But still, we didn't have any of this on here today. We do now. It's all plumbed up. New brake lines at the back, new handbrake cables. yeah, we're looking pretty good. I think it's been a good day's work. And yeah, tomorrow, let's get this body back on the car. All right, new day now, and we are basically ready to start dropping this body. I've been doing a couple of things off camera, a bit boring things and things that are difficult to film, so I'll just quickly show you what I've done. All right, well, first up, I've been routing, you can see the starter cable through here. I've been plugging them in. I've just realized I need to cut this. I've been fitting new sort of clips onto here. And then, yeah, I've plugged the starter in there as well. And I've routed this. This will eventually go into here. If you remember from the dismantling or taking the body off, that was one of the stages, and then a bolt will just hold that on there. So that was all good, but if I just show you down here, as you can see, I've put all these new sort of clips in just to hold things in place a bit better again. And then, yeah, I think it will eventually sit around here somewhere. I can't quite remember off the top of my head, but it's not really relevant at this point. I've also put this cover on here just to get out of the way, and then the engine brace over. That's just going to stop it from, well, I guess tipping or anything dodgy that could potentially happen, just to be on the safe side, really. And then I've also just zip tied these wiring harnesses to the brace as well, just to sort of keep them up out the way, because they need to be up here. They will eventually connect up in here and up in there. But for now, we're pretty much there. I've got all the cables hanging again, so that's all right. And I've also duct taped over here. And that's obviously the bit that I pointed out yesterday that's broken. I need to wait for that to arrive, but I'm just keeping it out the way for now. So yeah, I think it's showtime, but before we drop the body, we've got to get the bottom line back up again. A bit annoyingly, when putting a torque tube in, I sort of pushed the whole chassis down. So if you have a look at this chassis leg here, and then if you look where it's meant to connect to, it's about, you know, that's sort of about the line, and you can see we're way behind. So we need to pull this back out, which thankfully we're on the pallet, so we can do that with the forklift, no problem. So pull it out, but also if you have a look at the torque tube, if I go straight to it and then you look at the bit that it's meant to sit into, as you can see, it's not quite straight there either. So we need to pull it out and around slightly. So yes, I think it's showtime. Time to make two become one. Okay, the back bits are in, kind of. I do have to do this as well. Oh, that's gonna be a tough one to line up, actually. I'm gonna have to have a little look at that. But the suspension bits are in anyway. I can loosen them off a bit and move it around, I think. I'm gonna have to have a look at that. But I've had to stop because my torque gun's run out of battery. So I'm just charging it up. But in the meantime, I'm thinking this front end, it's sitting a bit lower. As you can see, we need like an inch or so. So I think I'm actually just gonna prop the sort of chassis up from this end and then connect it all together. I'm just gonna connect it initially sort of on the bolts here and on the other side, plus our suspension bits. And then once that's done, I think I should be able to lift the body up, move the pallets out of the way, and then I can get a bit of a better view, sort of do the chassis bits underneath, etc., etc. Right, I've actually just properly looked at the car from a distance for the first time. And I feel like we can actually call it a car now. Like, this is awesome. We've still got quite a bit to go, but actually seeing it look like an Aston Martin again, that's really exciting. Need this torque gun to charge already? Oh, yes, come on, look at that. Now, only Aston Martin owners or people who've driven an Aston are going to understand this, but that leathery Aston Martin smell, oh, it's very nice to be reunited with that. As weird as that sounds. That smell just feels like progress, so.
I actually proceeded to connect up the front chassis to the body whilst forgetting to hit the record button, typically. However, with the forklift propping up the pallets at the front, this turned out to be actually a really easy job and only took me 5 minutes or so. And so at this point, I thought I'd try to lift the car up. This was huge, as you could tell by my celebrations, but I wasn't home and dry just yet.
Oh. Get in there.
And that's because I ended up struggling to figure out how to get these bolts to sit in place for ages. They just didn't seem to thread and stay in place, but thankfully, with Gary's help from DB9 Garage, he was able to explain that the bolt needs to be held in with a nut in the boot space. With the battery disconnected though, I cannot do this just yet as the boot is electronically released, but it's worth showing this to you guys as well, and it will be done soon. So I'm gonna have to leave those for another day, but in the meantime, I can connect the final brackets that connect this chassis to the body. These are located in the middle to back section of the car, and there's a bracket for either side held in with 4 bolts each. I did find I had to realign the holes a bit to make sure the screws could thread, but this wasn't a big issue, and soon enough, they were both connected.
Right, that is now all the chassis to body bolts that I can do for now. I think there's some more under the middle of the car, but I can't get to them right now with the pallets in the way. So, should be able to lift this car up and yeah, it should be all right.
Finally, with all the bolts connecting the chassis to body, excluding the 2 we have to do once the battery is connected, I can lift the car right up.
We did it. Come on. And well, look at that, 2 have become 1. I can finally get rid of these pallets. It's been sat on them for nearly a few months now. But finally, as you can see, we just got transmission line to put in there. We've got the starter cable here. But other than that, we're looking pretty darn good. All the chassis parts are connected back to the body, which to me makes it seem like a good point to end this video. I'm gonna try and keep them a bit shorter so they're not such big tasks to watch, I guess. But yeah, body's on. So next episode, hopefully we'll get all the wiring put together and we'll get that first start. Hope you've enjoyed the episode. Hit that thumbs up button as usual if you've liked it. If you're new, feel free to subscribe. We got more stuff coming, including the first start. So really would love to bring you guys all along for that. And yeah, hope you've enjoyed it. This has been incredibly stressful for me. It's a lot of money that I'm messing around with trying to connect body to chassis. So it's been stressful. Yeah, hope you've enjoyed it and see ya next week. Bye bye.